international regulatory law. The other company director, Ross Anderson, who's American, has a strong background in sales and e-commerce. For the enterprise focused on in this marketing plan, Svalin has formed a strategic alliance with the owner of Southern Field Welding, Neil Justison, out of Burley, Idaho. The goal of this venture is to export Southern Field Welding's frac water heaters to Russia. Fracturing is a method by which a borehole is used to create fractures in rock formations in order to increase the rate by which oil and natural gas can be extracted. Wells are fractured by pumping in high-pressure liquids at high temperatures. Frac water heaters facilitate this process by melting a thick layer of surface ice. And this is a picture of the product, the frac trucks. They're mounted on trucks ordinarily. They can be mounted on other formats, as they'll explain later. Russia is the largest exporter of natural gas in the world and the third largest exporter of oil. The fuel sector accounts for 30% of the Russian GDP and generates more than 80% of export revenues. The Russian gas and oil industry experienced dramatic growth over the last 8 years, rendering the entire economy dependent upon it. Consequently, the energy sector in Russia has assumed center stage in Russian politics. Political involvement in the Russian oil industry has fostered a business environment hostile to foreign investment. Recent joint ventures with Western oil giants ended with Russian partners redefining contracts and terms of business in their own favor. Svalin will be somewhat insulated from this volatile political environment. By targeting the oil field service companies themselves, as opposed to the oil companies, they'll be less affected by government intervention. Here's a graph comparing the cultural measurements of the United States and Russia within the Hofstede framework. Due to the large discrepancy of the power distance scores, Americans doing business in Russia must be prepared to expect strict hierarchical management systems and business relationships. Similarly, American individualists may be perplexed by the collectivist tendencies of the Russian counterparts. Outsiders must earn trust and loyalty in a collectivist society. Lastly, the two countries have very different reactions to uncertainty. In uncertainty-avoidant cultures like Russia, events should be clearly understandable and as predictable as possible. The Kremlin continues to enact bureaucratic obstacles to licensing, registration, and certification of viable imports into Russian territory. Often the fees involved far exceed the actual cost of the service or good being imported. International investors continue to lobby for Russian compliance with World Trade Organization standards. If the new technology proposed by Svalin is perceived as a competitive stressor to other existing technologies in Russia, they may be up against a variety of protectionist barriers. And next, Sarah's going to talk about the target market assessment.
The U.S. Department of Commerce has identified the Russian oil field services market as one of the most promising markets for U.S. exporters. Traditionally, Russian oil majors have completed their service needs through sort of in-house branches because of a perception that it's better to spend money in the company as opposed to outside the company. Recently, however, this has changed. In 2005, it was estimated that 70% of all services were completed in-house. However, by the next year, 2006, it was about 50-50. 50% of the services were completed in-house, while the other 50% were completed by independent service companies. So what we see now for the oil field services market are spin-offs from Russian oil majors and major international service companies like Halliburton and Schlumberger, and then also some consolidated Russian service providers. Also, the Russian oil field services market is rapidly growing. It grew from $10.5 billion industry in 2005 to about $15.3 billion in 2007. What's driving this growth is mainly increased opportunities for independent service providers and also a push towards modernization of equipment and processes. Falling oil prices and complex projects in Siberia have highlighted the need for technological upgrades and efficiency. Therefore, we think Svalin can capitalize on the need for modernization and also the perception of American products as being both high-tech and high-quality. Sorry a minute.
Hi, Megan. I'm going to talk about the competitive landscape. So what Svalin really has going for it is that it has a really high level of customization. They can really take a frac truck and put it on any sort of wheelbase for any type of terrain, whether it is rugged, Siberian, or they have some other examples that are more tank-like. So that's their number one unique differentiator. However, they do have some strong competition. Within the U.S., we were able to identify very easily three main competitors. All of these U.S. manufacturers have in common that they do some level of customization. And while they do focus their efforts on manufacturing for U.S. companies, such as in the Rocky Mountains and even in the Gulf region, they have shipped these frac trucks internationally before. One company cited Algeria as being one of the locations. And then we also have the international manufacturers. For instance, China, as part of the China Company and Petroleum Company, they have their own in-house fracking manufacturer, and they actually have offices worldwide. So they're not just producing for their own country, they're also producing for others. And while it might not be an immediate threat in terms of moving into Russia, it is a threat in that it might make it harder to get into China if they wanted to expand to China, because some of these countries that have their own in-house manufacturers are nationalistic and would prefer to give their own companies business versus the U.S. The last thing I want to touch on is the substitutes. There are a few substitutes. One is no frac truck at all, and in that case, that just means they don't extract as much product out of the ground, as well as homemade frac trucks, which are fairly dangerous. Water heaters tagged onto the back of things like RVs and campers. And then there's also the possibility for remanufactured fracking equipment, so where you're taking used equipment and just kind of re-engineering it, making it more up to date to kind of extend the life, and you can do that to save cost. So now I'm going to take you through a real quick SWOT analysis. The strengths for Svalin is it has a very low operational cost, mainly because it has a very small team, which is one of its weaknesses. So it kind of works twofold. They're able to keep their costs really low, but at the same time they have small manpower. They do have a higher level of customization than what we've seen with competitors, and our team is very international and experienced. One of the main weaknesses that we've found was that there just isn't a lot of research or data available, and that can be a hindrance trying to find out things on the industry. Opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities. It's definitely high in demand. As gas prices drop, they need to actually get as much oil as possible out to make it worth their while. So right now is a really good time for fracking equipment. And there's this shift in the industry from going from in-house, like Shannon mentioned, to independent. Threats, however, the overall economic downturn, this equipment is very expensive, and so there could be some resistance to purchasing.
All right, so after doing all this analysis, the SWOTs, we determined that there is a market in Russia for Svalin. The next question logically is how? How does Svalin enter Russia? And when we did our initial interview with John and Ross from Svalin via Skype, they had really said that they wanted to focus on home market production. They have this proprietary technology. Neil works in Idaho. I don't think Neil wants to move to Russia to produce these trucks in that foreign market. So really we focused on the left side of